Dalia Fahmy is the Director of International Relations and Associate Professor of Political Science at Long Island University. She joins us now from Princeton in New Jersey. Good to have you with us, Professor. As well as calling for an end to Israel's attack on Gaza, leaders at the Saudi summit have rejected justifying Israel's actions as self-defense. What impact will this meeting have on the conflict, do you think?
Putting these meetings in a greater perspective, while they were meeting today and on Thursday, many of these countries attended the human rights meeting of the top 20 economies. What became very clear is while they were meeting, that's when the violence was intensifying. To put things into perspective, between October 7th and November 2nd, Israel has dropped 25,000 tons on 1,200 targets in Gaza. That is the equivalent of 2 nuclear weapons. If we look at the number of atrocities, while we know that the number of deaths are 11,000, the number of bodies under the rubble could be upward of 6,000. We heard the numbers of 30,000 injuries. We know that 70% of Gazans are internally displaced. We know that there is zero electricity, that there is zero water. And so what we're hearing, according to Jens Larke from the United Nations, is that if there is a hell on earth, it is called Northern Gaza. And so while these international meetings are occurring, violence is increasing. Just today, the largest hospital was surrounded. Of all of the hospitals in Gaza, 70% of them are no longer functioning. And so it's interesting that the meetings are calling for breaks in the violence, but not necessarily in terms of ending the levels of violence that have been occurring. While Secretary Blinken did say that the number of deaths of Palestinians has to end, or has to come to an end at some point, the United States is also negotiating $13 billion of emergency relief to Israel, as well as $116 billion between Israel and Ukraine in security funding. And so for the Palestinian people, policy has to be policy, language has to be firm, and it can no longer work in the network of meetings that while they are simultaneously occurring, the violence is increasing.
We finally have a Western leader, the French President Emmanuel Macron, calling for Israel's attack on civilians in Gaza to stop. As you say, the US Secretary of State is now also saying that too many Palestinians have been killed in this conflict. But it's taken the deaths of 11,000 Palestinians for them to finally change their tune on this. Do you see more Western leaders following suit?
It, while these two did make these statements, they didn't support it with actual policy. Again, while Secretary Blinken did talk about the level of violence occurring in Palestine and the deaths of Palestinians, there is a push to release more security funding to Israel. France is the #1 seller of arms to the Middle East. And so when we think about language, they're both also dealing with internal coming elections and internal pushback from communities that are saying that the policies are increasingly not humanitarian. Both France and the United States hold themselves as the premier examples of democracy and human rights and fraternity for the world. And for them to come 1 month later and to start acknowledging the level of violence occurring today in Gaza, again, the United Nations considering this hell on earth, that is the language. It is too little, too late, and if it's not backed with policy, it's just symbolic rhetoric.
Okay, Dalia Fahmy, we will have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us on TRT World.